So, very welcome, a warm welcome, everyone. And this session today is, I would say, maybe, yeah, sorry. So, the session today is in maybe continuation with what we were doing earlier on Thursdays at 9, because the path is long and arduous, and from time to time we need reminders. So it's maybe I thought maybe it would be nice to listen together and reflect together, and all of us are just like co-travelers, and it would be just a space to listen. Basically, we'll be listening, and maybe I'll bring up some texts also from the books. So what we had been doing, the Bodhisattva way, we'll take up bits and pieces from here and there, and again there won't be any method to it, but whatever interests us and whatever we can take it as a part of our practice, we will be taking it, right? So, and we'll be listening to teachers on the basic root verses, root texts of these Buddhist practices. And even if we don't have any idea of, say, a word or a concept or a name in Buddhism, uh, don't mind, doesn't matter, and just take the essence for the practice. I think that's very important, that we can take the essence for the practice and let go of the concepts and definitions. If the concepts and definitions are helping in the practice, that's only that we will consider here. So I'm just sharing because don't think that we somebody here is adept in Buddhism and we know what the words mean and the meanings mean. Just that we are exploring these practices, and they are very helpful on the path. They are very simple practices which are very helpful on the path. So that's why we have just started exploring them together. So I thought that maybe today we'll take up Atisha's verses on training the mind, and we'll listen to the teachings of Jetsunma Tenzing Palmo on these root verses. Before that, if one of us can read out the Bodhisattva vows for all of us, it would be just serving as a nice reminder for all of us that why are we walking the path at all. So I will be putting it on the screen. If you are comfortable, you can put your video on if you want to, although mostly we'll be just listening. And if you don't want, that's also okay. So let me just find this out. So this is the vows, Bodhisattva vows, which even the Dalai Lama ji, he reminds himself every day in the morning, reads for himself just as a reminder. So if one of you can unmute and maybe slowly read out these lines for us as reminders, that would be nice. Yeah.
May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path. Sorry, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings. May I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and are awakened.
Thank you, Raviji. So let's just look at it, look at these lines for a minute silently. All of us will just look at these lines for a minute. So I'll just now put up Atisha's verses on mind training, which we are going to listen to, the commentary that we are going to listen. So I'll just put them on. Okay, so these are the verses on which we are going to listen to reflections. These are the points. So if another one of you would, although this will take time, like we will not do all these points in one day. This will take a long time, and we'll begin with the first one today. But if one of you can just read it out, because in reading it out, somehow it goes in the body and somehow kind of gets an imprint within us. So if one of you can read half of these and the other one can read then the other half, that would be nice division of labor. So yeah, anyone who wants to unmute and read these verses for us.
Okay, so we need to read the one that's just highlighted, right?
Yeah, yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Atisha's Lojong root verses on training the mind. The supreme understanding is to realize the meaning of selflessness. The supreme spiritual discipline is to tame one's own mind. The supreme great quality is altruism. The supreme oral instruction is to observe the mind at all times. The supreme remedy is to know that nothing has self-nature. The supreme conduct is to be in disharmony with the world. The supreme accomplishment is a continuous decrease of disturbing emotions. The supreme sign of accomplishment is a continuous decrease of wishes and wants. The supreme generosity is non-attachment. The supreme ethical conduct is to pacify one's mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So maybe one of you, another one, can read the second half for all of us.
Supreme patience is to take the lowest place. Supreme effort is letting go of activity. Supreme concentration is not altering the mind. Supreme wisdom is to not grasp onto anything as the self. Supreme spiritual teacher is the one who exposes our hidden flaws, and the supreme instruction is the one that helps us to strike at those flaws. The supreme companions are mindfulness and alertness. The supreme inspiration is enemies, hindrances, disease, and suffering. The supreme method is to be natural. The supreme way of benefiting is to help others enter the Dharma. The supreme benefit is a mind that turns towards the Dharma. Thank you.
Thank you. So I also take these practices as a very, I think they have a very purifying effect on us. Just to listen to them, to read them for ourselves. They really, first of all, we recognize our impurities and weaknesses and the ill will and the hatred and the anger, all that, this divisiveness that goes in us, in our mind. First of all, we recognize that, and then through these verses and lines and their reflections, I think it really helps and contributes in purification. And as they say that we all have enlightened nature, the Buddha nature. So the only thing that we have to do is continue this practice of purification. Just like, we clean the dirt from the utensils. So the shine doesn't come from anywhere else. The shine is inherent. We just continue to clean the dirt from the utensils. So I think that continuous cleaning is what happens through just reading out and reminding ourselves of these things. So we are going to listen now to Jetsunma Tenzing Palmo, and she's going to bring about one by one, she's going to reflect upon these verses. Starting from today, the supreme understanding is to realize the meaning of selflessness. So I'll just play the teaching now. And if there are reflections, we can pause in between and later on take the reflections also. Just a second. Where is that? Perfect. So, okay, so we'll start from here.
In the history of Tibetan Buddhism. So we are going to go through this text. He of course, wrote several books and commentaries which are very famous in Tibet, but this is quite short and manageable. The point with this text is that one doesn't have to be a Buddhist. It is, I think it's a very, it just covers the spiritual life. It's not in any way something which anybody here, I think, would not accept, I hope. If you don't accept it, that's fine, just put it aside. So this text came about because 3 of Atisha's main students came to him and said, the Dharma is so vast and so difficult to comprehend it all. What would you say is the essence that what are the most important points that we should not neglect? And so this was Atisha's reply. He talks about the supreme understanding. It means the highest understanding, the highest of everything, the most important of all these different points that he's going to give here. So the first is the supreme understanding. I'm just looking here. Yeah. The supreme understanding is to realize the meaning of selflessness. So he plunges us straight in the deep end here. The Tibetan word is for understanding is kepa. Kepa means like a kind of skillful understanding that is a learning scholastically. And so he says the most important thing to understand is the meaning of selflessness. So the Buddha taught 3 essential points, which he said is like the underpinning of his whole doctrine. The first is that ordinary worldly life based on the idea that happiness is contingent on pleasure and so forth. I have to go through these quickly because we've got a lot to get through. Is basically unsatisfactory, because coming into this world, birth, old age, sickness, death, that faces us all. getting, not getting what we want and getting what we don't want. This is the experience of all of us. And so however much we get, we always want more, and somehow it just keeps going round and round and round and round. And this makes our ordinary, conceptually worldly mind very unsatisfactory. People suffer. I mean, you look at people happy, 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 but then when you start talking to them, all their problems, all their doubts, all their pain. So the first sign of being is that our ordinary, unenlightened life is very unsatisfactory, full of dis-ease. One of the reasons is that we hold on and we cling to that which we think will give us pleasure, hoping that it will last. And in the depths of our beings know that it is impermanent. Things are changing moment to moment to moment to moment. Sometimes things change for the better, but very often the very thing we hold on to so tightly, when we lose it, again, it causes a lot of pain. And the third sign of being is this one here, selflessness, which in Sanskrit is called Atman. Now, of course, all of you devout Hindus here are brought up on the idea of Atman. And so when one comes across a teaching on no Atman, then people get very confused. But I think it's important to understand that the word Atman just means I. And when the Buddha was saying no I, he was not referring to the Upashanic idea of a kind of cosmic I, or an I which is at one with the absolute. He was talking about just our ordinary idea of I, which he then reduced into what are called the five skandhas, the five elements of aggregates of being, our body, our perceptions, our sensations, our feelings, consciousness, mental formations. He just said, if you look for a permanent, solid, enduring self, you won't find one. This is a very fundamental core. I mean, all religions say we have to dissolve the small I, the small self.
So we are going to take a pause here. I think it's good to take it in short bits. And what she was just sharing on when we look at where is the I, we don't find it. And that's what the Buddha was trying to say by saying that there is anatman, there is no self. In the sense of this egoistic self that we call that I am this, that's what we don't find. And we see that what we think ourselves to be is just these images in our head about this is me and this is not me. And also that we cling to ourselves as this body self, that this is where I end, this is who I am. And after that, whatever may happen, it doesn't matter because this is who I am. So, but we are now, even scientifically speaking, logically speaking, we realize that we don't end here, we are interconnected. And if I throw garbage out in my neighbor's yard or even outside my so-called body and self, it gets back to me. The poison will get back to me because we are all interconnected. So I think it's very liberating to realize that when I say that, okay, this is my desire, and I want to fulfill it. And when you search for this I within yourself, you don't find that I. It's almost like illusory that you don't find it. You find bones, you find maybe a few thoughts scattered here, feelings scattered here. But there is an impersonality towards all that. Everyone has thoughts, everyone has feelings, everyone has bones and flesh and ideas and opinions. So there is no personal self, and that's what she was hinting at the first teaching, which says the supreme understanding is to realize this meaning of selflessness, that there is no solid egoistic self in here. All that is there is a kind of an impersonal awareness. And this is what even Rupert Spira reminds us, if those of us who listen to Rupert Spira's teachings, he also reminds us again and again that if you try to find where is this I, you only stumble upon there is just this presence of awareness, which is aware of thoughts coming and going, feelings coming and going, bodily sensations, maybe a few past memories, but there is no solid I. So I think this is quite liberating in the aspect that we usually trouble ourselves that these are my desires, while we see that everyone has desires. So there is nothing personal about desires. And as Mother and Sri Aurobindo also say, that as if there is a whole world of desires, and we just keep like sticking to this one and that one and call it my desire, and that becomes the cause of our suffering. And the
Um,
idea of, Shreya, you have something to share?
I just had a question. I mean, I'm not sure I completely understand what was being said, because, I mean, yes, there is no I to be found in the physical form, perhaps, but for me, for example, that I is all of my stories all together. So it's a strong emotion that I almost, it's a sum total of all those stories, and I can't say where does it reside in my mind, but it almost has a character. It's not also not undeniable that, for at least for me, that there is an I that makes, creates suffering, that makes me feel attached, and desires and expectations and all of that.
So, how they describe it to reflect upon it is that when you try, just a second, when you try to look for this I, as you were sharing, that almost it has a character and color and texture, maybe. So, they suggest that, teachers suggest that go and look, try to find what kind of a texture it is, try to find what kind of color it is. So try to define it. If you think that it is solid, then try to, in detail condition, you try to define it and find it out whether it stays like that. So that is one of the contemplations or reflections that you can do. If you feel that there is a solidity and really it is there, I can't deny its presence, then it is beautiful to actually see through its true nature by going even closer. So when you sit quietly with yourself and you are looking at this I that you call that this is there, looking at what is the texture, what is the color of this I, how does it feel. So try to define it in as solid terms as possible and see whether it stays like that always or whether it keeps changing. Make sense, Shreya?
Yes, definitely. I will try it.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's for me. I mean, when you were saying all of these things, what comes to me immediately is, for example, it's not solid, it's almost changing. I mean, a desire today changes into another desire tomorrow, but there is this continuous presence of these little, as I said, this I is just a sum total of all my desires. It's every day there's something, right? Every day there is an expectation, in every moment rather,
Beautiful.
hidden or obvious.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's what I meant, that at least for me, there is a very heavy imprint of an I right now.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. And again, there is in teachings, they say that it's because the limited mind that we have, the conceptual, the logical, analytical mind, it keeps on connecting dots. Like I have an instance in the past and I have an instance after 2 years. So it tries to connect the dots, and hence the storyline is created. And therefore, it becomes very difficult to deny the storyline that is taking place in the head. And teachers have said, again, Tenzin Palmo again and again in her teachings also shares that this filter that we have, because the way you are connecting the dots and making a storyline, the other person has a different storyline in the head. That's very interesting to see. So the same incident has happened. 2 3 people are involved in that incident. The story in your head will be different from the story in the other person's head, although the
Yeah.
incidences appears to be the same.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they say that as if it is like a filter through which I am seeing, like a distortion of reality. तो अगर वो रियली में रियल है तो सबको एक जैसा दिखना चाहिए. Everyone should for the story should be same in the head. But the stories, if there are 10 people associated with one incident, in each one's mind, that's beautiful to see, the story is a different storyline is there. It's not the same storyline.
True.
Do you see that happening?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm. So what they say is that it makes us convinced that as if we are wearing, all of us are wearing goggles. So you are wearing yellow colored goggles and I am wearing red colored goggles, and we are seeing through this, what they say is the layer of conceptual mind, the logical, analytical, the mind which tries to connect the dots all the time, and in vain we are always attempting. So, and that's why we are always at clash with each other. And that's why they say that all the egos are at clash with each other, because everyone is seeing through their filter. And I am saying I am right. No, the other one is saying I am right. So everyone is saying I am right, I am right, I am right. And the thing is that nobody is right. So that's the beauty, that yellow colored goggles or red colored goggles or green colored goggles doesn't matter. Goggles are goggles. So can we just put the goggles aside? I think that's what is required of us to, can we have that humility of knowing that I don't see clearly. I know that I have a storyline, but that's not the truth. And I cannot say that I am more right than the other's storyline. I am as deluded as the other person. If I slowly get convinced through my blunders and sufferings and the life experiences, I think then we slowly gather that courage to keep the goggles aside and to be really open and receptive, in order to keep the mind receptive and flexible, that I know that my opinion or my viewpoint is not the absolute truth. I don't see clearly. I have my own patterns, I have my own thought and emotional patterns which are ruling me for ages now. So, I feel that more and more that we realize this, I don't have that much of trust in my thoughts and feelings and viewpoints. And that makes me more open to to be there and explore that, okay, let us hear what the other person wants to say also. So that's why in teachings, again and again, we encounter that they say that your mind is all stories, don't buy into them. Your mind is all stories, don't buy into them. Because if I am buying into the storylines, I am always keeping away from seeing reality as it is. And I may still see the ripple of the story arising because they are old patterns, they come again and again and they stay. So I may still see the story arising, the storyline arising, but when I see it arising, then I say, I've believed in you enough. I don't want to do that now. And you become again open to the present moment, and you're open and willing to listen to others and see what is benefiting the most. So I'm going to just add on and keep sharing. If anyone has any reflection in between, please do share. Uh, no need to raise your hand or anything, just unmute and share at any point of time. So any reflection here? Yeah, anyone? Taru? Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to say, like, to add on to what Shreya was saying, that these teachings or these verses are so contradictory to everything that we have, like, always heard. Like, I remember the 8 verses that we had taken up before. It was, it's like so paradoxical. Like, it was like all about I, that how we have to move beyond the I and stuff. And like this one also, that it's really important to first sit with yourself and see that, the way I have been seeing or doing life, it's not happening, right? Like something is not okay. So even though something sounds like totally ridiculous or paradoxical to something that I've always believed in, it's rather a good thing, right? Like I want to be open to it because the way I have been doing it, it's not right. Like it's not taking me to where I want to be. So that really helped me in being, because otherwise, the old in me really revolts that what is it saying? Like I do, this doesn't make any sense because it's so opposite of how I've been, that forget the self, or not forget the self, but yeah, and plus what you were sharing about, how the same instant is different for 10 people. I was reminded that in one of, Acharya Prashant's session, he was saying that I have experimented this several times, that if I'm saying something, like I gave a lecture or I gave a talk for say 20 minutes, and if there are 50 people saying, and after that, if I'll make them fill a questionnaire as to what did I say, what did you hear, all 50 would have different answers, and it's a possibility that I would feel that I didn't even say agree to one thing. Like I don't think I said what the 50 have written. Like how crazy is that? So it really is a good thing to realize that there is no right, there is no wrong. It's just that we are standing at different places at different times, and we see what from where we are standing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I think in realizing this, one also becomes very open and flexible in taking things in. Because usually we are so rigid about our views, and the mind is so narrow. And a narrow mind, the more narrower a mind is, I think the more conflicts we have. And these conflicts are the same conflicts that we have at even a nation's level. These wars happening between nations, just because we are so rigid in our head. So when we see that, yes, this is true, that everyone has their own storyline in the head about the same teaching or the same incident, then we see that, oh my God, then I don't need to stick to my view, that my view is right. And I can just, it is there, the view is there, we don't have to deject it or reject it, but can I just keep it aside and also consider what is being said or presented in front of me, what others are saying. So I think that really helps to, if we know that we are always seeing through filters and we have deluded and distorted visions, we are seeing through patterns, then it really helps to open up our minds. As Sri Aurobindo says, that the mind needs to be more wide and open and plastic and vast. And even though two opposing kind of views can actually come together and make a synthesis out of that. So that's our highest possibility. If only we can be so grounded that knowing that we really see through very little windows, and actually sharing with each other, reflecting with each other, and even listening to each other can actually lead to a lot of expansion instead of being very rigidly in my own narrow point of view. I think it really helps us expand much, because we are interconnected, no matter we may not believe it. And through others' point of view, through others' little window, we can actually really feel expanded in one sense. Okay, so anything else, anyone? So I thought maybe it would be a nice time. I just randomly pick up things from here and there to listen to this one, maybe a short clip of this. It's a different teaching. It's not exactly on the on Atisha's verses, but the point being shared in the first few minutes is very relevant to what we were discussing. So I'll just play it on and let's hear it shortly.
So basically, as we all know, the Buddha, who here is not a Buddhist? No. The Buddha taught his first sermon after his enlightenment in a place called Saranath, which is near to Varanasi. And although he had just, within the last few weeks attained to enlightenment, which he had been striving for countless eons, Aileen, can we get Lona in here? She's sitting outside. The shop's still open. And so he must have been incredibly blissful. After all those eons and eons of striving, finally he had broken through all those deep, thick fetters of ignorance, and he had become the truth. He had become a Buddha. What could be more fantastic than that? What could be more utterly liberating and blissful than that? But as we know, his first sermon, what he talked about mostly was a thing called dukkha, which means in English, it's usually translated as suffering, but it also has an idea of dissatisfaction or dis-ease. So, therefore, because mostly people know that the Buddha's first sermon was about suffering, and then he goes on to talk about other really jolly things like death and impermanence, and the fact that we don't have any self anyway. People tended to label, in the West, people tended to label Buddhism pessimistic. But, of course, Buddhism is not pessimistic. They were also very puzzled by, since Buddhism is such a pessimistic religion, there's no God, there's no self, there's all this talk about the hell realms and death and impermanence and suffering. that in Buddhist countries, people look so cheerful. Even in my Tibetan dictionary, which was written by one of the early Christian missionaries, he points out that the Tibetan people are cheerful, honest, good-natured, and so forth, and a very happy lot. But of course, how much happier they would be if they had the true message of Jesus. And he's clearly puzzled why they should be cheerful, happy, and so forth. So this is what we're going to talk about. Now, if you take the Four Noble Truths, as we know, the first truth is the truth of the dissatisfaction of our ordinary life. I'm not going to go on a lot about Four Noble Truths, but we get it in perspective. So, he said, birth. He starts with birth. Now, mostly in the West, we think birth is a time of rejoicing, not dukkha. Of course, it's dukkha for the mother. And we have to remember that when the child comes out, it doesn't laugh. It yowls. It's considered healthy. Birth, old age, sickness, death. Getting what we don't want, not getting what we do want. So if we think about that, that covers a very wide range. What the ego wants so often doesn't get, and we suffer. What we don't want, we often do get, and so we suffer. And the point is, we never know when or where. Today, we are happy, we are healthy, we have lots of money, we have a nice partner, everything's wonderful. Tomorrow, we discover we have some incurable disease, our partner leaves us, the stock market crashes, and suddenly from being up here, we're down there. We don't know. We really don't know. It's like a circle. So sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. Samsara is compared to an ocean. An ocean has waves. Waves go up, waves come down. Go up, come down. And as long as we grasp only at that which gives to us a sense of satisfaction and are in denial of that which goes against what I want, we suffer. Okay.
So let us take like 2 minutes or so just for a silent contemplation, and then we can come up with reflections. So, if there is any reflection from anyone. One thing which comes to me again and again, since we talk about bringing the mind to rest, you know, bringing the mind again and again to the maybe rising and falling of the abdomen, or we connect with breathing, bringing the mind to the breath. I think we cannot do that. We practice of stilling the mind, resting the mind, if I'm not yet convinced that a scattered mind, a distracted mind, is really not benefiting me. And this couplet from Kabir again and again comes to me in various different manners, where he says that I ran and ran and ran in all the directions. But when I stopped running, I was tired of running and I stopped. Then I realized that what I was looking for was with me all the time. So I think the aspect of disenchantment is very, very important. That if I am actually enchanted with the world in one or the other manner, that it will bring me lasting happiness. Some relationship, some work, some job, some country, something in this world will give me lasting happiness. Something in this world can be my really solid, unshakable ground. If I am not convinced, then I must run and run towards my desires and enchantments. And Sri Aurobindo and Mother also says that they say that passions, even passions, are desirable than inertia, tamasic inertia. So if I'm not convinced, if I have some hope in mind that something in this world can be my really solid, unshakable ground, which will bring me always lasting happiness, something off the world, material existence, then I must go out from my comfort zones and I must search and look for it. I think that's how, through our experiences, we get convinced that, or have disenchantment or udasinta in Hindi, that what I'm really looking for, this ultimate security, the ultimate safety, the ultimate ground and solidity, and unshakable happiness in me, or just a certain contentment in me, that really cannot be found anywhere in this fleeting world of changing phenomena. So, if I am not convinced, I think this is very important. Otherwise, we remain in tamasic inertia for a very long time. Even a lifetime may pass by, and I would be in that stagnant state. So, if we still have desires, if we still have interests and inclinations which call us that yes, wahan milega, I think we must run and go in search of that. It is much, much better than being really stagnant and complaining. So if there is even an inkling in me that yes, that relationship or that work or that place or that country or that ashram, there I will get this solid, unshakable contentment, I think I must go out and follow it and not remain stagnated in wherever I am right now and keep complaining that life is not good, life is not good. If life is not good, and if I still have hopes from the material existence, from the samsara, as they were saying, I must go out and work towards it. So that slowly, slowly, slowly through our experiences, either we get that ground, God knows, or we get really disenchanted that kahin nahi milega. And then I think then it becomes very uh, easy, if I can say, not that easy. The mind still is monkey mind and keeps scattering around. But I think then we really get convinced that it's really beneficial for me to bring the mind home to the breath, and the body and in the here and now. Then we can really, really rest the being. And what Kabir says that, hey, you have been walking for eons, you have been walking for ages. In one of the songs he says, Chalat chalat jug bhaya, kaun batavega dham ji. So who will tell what is your destination? Aren't you tired of walking and walking and walking? Referring to this restless, dispersive mind that we have. And this is our chance. I think this is the importance of human birth cannot be stressed enough, I feel. So on one hand it can be really light and airy and breezy, but on the other hand, paradoxically, we really have this one chance where we have this precious human birth. So I'm going to read out something from a book um, on something related, and maybe it just resonates with what we were sharing. So he's sharing, we must consider three things: the preciousness of being born a human being, the fact of impermanence, what she was sharing, that things are changing every moment and we cannot have a solid ground anywhere, the fact of impermanence, and the problem of samsaric existence, this bondage to being compelled to take a birth. So there is a different aspect of taking a birth consciously, which is rare. Usually we, because of our ashas and trishnas, unfulfilled desires and unfulfilled impulses, we continue, we are compelled to take this birth, human birth. We have no choice. uh, and Sri Aurobindo and mother also say that even when we leave the body, it's like our desires are still living and they piggyback on somebody else who is alive and try to fulfill themselves through that person. How, it doesn't feel very nice somehow if you think of it, that your desires have a separate life. So you think that you are dead. Kabir ji says, Asha Trishna na mari keh gaye Das Kabir. So he says that you think that you will be dead after the body drops away. But your unfulfilled desires, unfulfilled expectations and demands, they actually don't die and they compel you to take again an unconscious birth. So this is the problem of samsaric existence, this bondage to life and death, that you're going to be born again and again just because of compulsion, not that you are going to benefit people, that's why you are taking conscious birth, but you're compelled because of your unfulfilled desires and wants, which you were not able to let go of in the previous life. So he says that used well, this body is a ship to liberation from this knot of ego. Used well, this body is a ship to liberation. Otherwise, it is an anchor in samsara. This body is the agent of all good and evil. And he says that this human existence, moreover, is not to be achieved by force or mere chance. It is the result of positive actions. So definitely, if we are endowed with a human birth in this life and not any other being, which has a different consciousness, in human life, you have the possibility of getting liberated from the knot of this ego consciousness. And hence, it is a result of positive actions in the previous lives. So can we know this and not waste the precious human birth? And then he says that, and because it is rare for beings to accomplish positive actions, a precious human existence is indeed difficult to obtain. Nevertheless, we have now managed to be born into such a state, and we have entered the path and we are receiving the teachings. But if we are unable to practice them, simply listening to the teachings will not in itself liberate us from samsara. And when he says liberate us from samsara, it doesn't mean that you would not take birth again, because Mother and Sri Aurobindo also talk about taking a conscious birth for the work of the divine. But the way we are mostly is we are just compelled to take births after births. It's not a conscious birth. And will be of no help to us when we are confronted by the hardships of birth, disease, old age, and death. If we do not follow the doctor's prescription when we are sick, then even if the doctor sits constantly by your side, the pain will not go away. So I think this is very important for us, all of us, to know, because all of us here are in a stage that it's not that we listen to teachings, we read scriptures. Haven't we read enough? But why do we become so dull when it comes to practice? Why is there so much of lurking around in our comfort zones? Why do we sleep again and again? So I think he says again and again that what a waste of these precious teachings, that you have these teachings, you have the scriptures with you, and even half a verse of a scripture is enough, but you don't practice. So what use is the prescription if I don't take the medicine, if I just keep the medicine somewhere and I'm not taking it? How can the doctor, even the doctor, how can it help? And then he says that we should make up our minds that we will practice the dharma instead of throwing our lives in meaningless activities. So parallelly, to become conscious of the meaningless activities in our day-to-day life, whenever the mind again and again tries to connect the dots in the stories, I think it's a very meaningless activity. Have we got anything from there? And remaining in my stories, believing in my stories, I actually get rid of even a precious new moment that is there in front of me, a very fresh new moment. We are not present, the mind is not present. The mind is just ruminating and ruminating, obsessively regurgitating about the past and the future, and all the dots that connect. And even the body tries to tell. The body brings up diseases. Hey, stop, stop, stop. What are you talking about? But even then I don't listen. So there is fire in the palace. The body is brimming full of diseases, trying to make me understand that I am not in the present moment. Still I am so stubborn. Still I am so stubborn. And at times these teachings also bring a bit of sadness, that why are we so stubborn. So he says that to use our human lives to accomplish the Buddha dharma is like crossing the ocean in search of costly jewels and afterwards returning home with every kind of precious thing. Well, it would be a shame to come back empty handed. So he says that you took a human birth and still you were not able to realize who you truly are. So as if you were dipping in that ocean full of jewels and you come back empty handed. You did. And Kabir, again I'm reminded of Kabir, because he also shares that the true seeker will dip inside and find the true treasure, and the other ones who are just scared of dipping inside, truly taking the plunge, they will just sit at the corner and wonder about it. And the true seeker will actually go take a deep plunge and get the true treasure. He says, Hira lal been lave. That lal treasure, the red colored treasure, the jewel, he would go and find it out, making use of this precious human birth. So I think, yeah. So I think this is very inspirational. So I'll just read the last few lines and then we can take reflections. So he says that, but if we are preoccupied only with the worldly activities of this life, business, farming, prevailing over enemies, helping friends, hoping for an important position and so on, and we die before we have made time for spiritual practice, it would be just like coming home empty handed from an isle of jewels, I'm sorry. What an incredible waste. Therefore, we should think to ourselves, I am not going to miss my chance. So I think this is quite inspirational. At least I find it very inspirational. And from time to time, if we go across these teachings, it's good if something shakes within my being. So, are there any reflections? We can take them up. So maybe some of us, if we are wondering that what to practice, what really to practice, when he's saying that don't waste time and do the practice. I think one of the very, very important things that we are realizing more and more is to really tame the mind. Because when we sit silently, we see that we hardly can remain silent. And this practice of bringing the mind, which we were talking earlier, that I will be convinced to bring the mind to the breath and the body and in the present moment. I think this can't be stressed enough, because again, quoting Sri Aurobindo, he says that things can be done better actually with a silent and immobile mind, rather than having a mind which is so scattered and dispersed in every direction. And he says that we can really have an intuitive living when the mind is silent, because when the mind is silent, it's with the breath in the present moment, it's almost like a receptacle, like an empty receptacle which is ready to receive intuitive guidance. And all of us want to be guided intuitively within, from within. We are always wanting to know that what is my inner guidance, what does this presence want me to do in this life. But if not for a silent mind, a mind which rests in this stillness within, the refuge within, we cannot expect to be guided from within. And all of us want to take better decisions in our life. All of us want to take decisions which benefit ourselves and others. So if we really want to know what is the divine will, if we really want to understand where my life wants to go, I think the importance of a rested mind, a mind resting in the present moment with the body and the breath, and not dispersed in the stories and trying to connect the dots in the head, that cannot be stressed enough. So this is the practice, I think, which we can take home for today and later, which masters have stressed upon, to have a mind which is restful, just ek ठहरा hua mind, a rested mind, a mind which is not now running after things and people and places. It really helps, and I think it, forget about the future, it really improves the quality of my life that I'm living right now, having a rested mind. And everybody wants to have a good quality of life, won't we? So yeah, I think I should stop. Said enough. So any last comments, any last reflections, anyone? Okay, so I'm assuming there is nothing at the moment. In that case, we'll continue the reflections next week, hopefully, same time. And thank you everyone for listening together and joining in. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Mm.